So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe as always, and wherever you are around the world, hope things are good in your neck of the woods. Now, moving to the second race of the season, a circuit which has often provided plenty of controversy, plenty of excitement, plenty of risk and reward in equal measure. It is the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah. And of course, there have been some changes to the circuit, which we will talk about in due course. But I, for one, am really looking forward to this. Now, a lot of people may have already thrown in the towels, pulled out the white flags, given up on 2023. But of course, we're only in the second race. There's still plenty to talk about heading into the next race of the season. There's still plenty to look forward to, even though what we saw in Bahrain, if it happens again, I think some people might be a little bit worried about the championship as a whole. But talking about all of the things we've got to look forward to in this preview, we have the DNF1 panel in full force for the first time this season on a preview episode. We've got Courtney Pine and Lee Wallington joining us on this one. Lads, we got the band back together for the first race preview that we're all together again. How are we doing? Courtney, you got a nice new chair, feeling a lot more comfortable by the looks of it. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, absolutely loving it. I'm probably the most comfortable I've ever felt doing a podcast, so I won't be as fidgety. So for those of you watching, you'll be able to focus more on what's being said rather than what I'm doing. But yeah, doing well. I'm looking forward to this race. I was a little bit downbeat after Bahrain, like I can imagine a lot of people were, but this circuit offers different characteristics and it usually offers plenty of safety cars, so it should offer us something a little bit different than what we saw in Bahrain.
Absolutely agree. I certainly hope it does, and hopefully this race will give us plenty of good things to talk about rather than some of the more controversial ones that we've been used to over the last few years. But of course, Jeddah always packs a bit of excitement every time around. Lee, this comes to you. How are you doing, mate? Comfortable as always. Are you looking forward to this weekend's race in Jeddah?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I got to admit, I'm looking forward to this race. I enjoyed the last race, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in this one. But from the few races we've had in Saudi Arabia, it hasn't been a snooze fest. It's quite an interesting circuit, as you've already both alluded to. The safety cars, it's quite a accident-heavy circuit. Obviously, I don't wish any harm on any driver. But obviously, it shakes up a race a bit when you have several safety cars and people crashing out. So it's a really unpredictable race. So it's looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we put the question to you guys on this one, what you thought of the circuit in Jeddah. As I said, this is the third time that the F1 World Championship will be racing around the circuit in Jeddah, a circuit that was very purpose-built for Formula One. You know, it's very unlike modern day street circuits where they try to incorporate it inside a city and just work a circuit with the parameters that they already have. This one was purpose built for that, and I think we can all agree that it's actually served to be rather good in terms of a template for street circuits going forward. We actually put a poll out for you lovely lot on our socials, DNF1_official for those interested. You'll see in our new background, if you're watching this on YouTube, all of the new info at the bottom there. So hopefully you guys enjoy that and make sure to follow us for more F1 stuff on there. And of course, you can get involved as well in all the topics that we discuss as well. Just let us know in the comment section or let us know on your favorite social media platform. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And of course, follow us on your favorite audio platform. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review. We'll give you a shout out on the next episode. So halfway through all of that, before I started plugging stuff, we ran a poll on Twitter to get your thoughts on Saudi Arabia. What did you think of the Jeddah circuit? Gotta say, a lot of you guys seem to be giving it a big thumbs up. 80% of you either loved it or liked it. 20% of you hated it, weren't a big fan. So if that was one of you guys, let us know in the comments why you didn't like the circuit in Jeddah. Let us know about that one. But as I said, guys, I for one absolutely love this circuit. I love the high speed element to it. It's very different to what we normally expect from street circuits. Of course, there's always that risk and danger, but because they're so tightly squeezed in between, there isn't really many opportunities to try and go flat out and go as fast as these cars can go. At Jeddah, I think we all agree it's certainly a circuit that really does seem that the cars are really going flat out, and the risk element to it is obviously very, very high. But of course, they're going to make some changes to the circuit as well. I don't know if people have been following, but from last season, a lot of the the season before, a lot of the drivers were given their feedback on this circuit. And whilst they enjoyed the high speed, high risk element to it, they did all agree that there were going to be elements to it that did need to be changed to make it a little bit more safer. And anyone following this on F1 last season, I think it was back in November, there's going to be some changes to the circuit, mostly at turns 3, 14, 19, 20, and 21. There's going to be a little bit more space. They're moving the barriers, so they're going to be a bit further out, and they're also changing the angle of the corners to make the cars go a little bit slower. So not too much, but I think all in the all for the rationale really of improving safety on the circuit. So guys, I've got to come to you guys on this one. As I said, a large part of what makes F1 exciting is the high speed, high risk element. But of course, a lot of people, myself included, would very much advocate for more safety measures, as many as they can possibly bring in to ensure the sport is as safe as it possibly can be. Some people, however, feel that sometimes the sport might be going a bit too safe, and with these changes, we have heard some people express their opinion on that one. How do you guys see it? Are you a fan of the changes that they're making at Jeddah? Do you feel like they're right to try and make it safer, or do you subscribe to the notion that, you know, F1 is a risky sport anyway, and sometimes they do have to dance with the devil a little bit, so to speak?
Yeah, look, I'm all for the changes for the sake of safety. Of course, look, we want to be entertained. I mean, I'm the first person to whinge if a race or, you know, a potential race isn't going to be entertaining. But at the same time, I don't want to be watching a live broadcast knowing it's likely somebody has died. So on the balance of things, I'd much rather like watch a race knowing that, you know, the races themselves are safe, and also these kind of safety measures will give drivers more confidence when it comes to overtaking and stuff like that. If Formula One was as dangerous as it was, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we probably wouldn't be seeing as many bold overtakes as we used to see. So I'm all for the safety changes. Of course, you know, you don't want to be going over the top with it. I'm the only thing I've sort of against that we've seen in recent years is the bringing in the runoff areas instead of gravel traps. I'm all for gravel traps because it obviously punishes mistakes. That does sort of open up the risk, but not in a way that, you know, risks the actual driver's life. It just risks the outcome of their race. So yeah, I'm all for safe. I'm all for the safety, but yeah, I'm all for the gravel traps.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at some circuits, gravel traps are probably warranted. I think this is one where perhaps the runoff areas might be a little bit better just to help the cars slow down a little bit more. But I like the changes. I think that they are going in the right direction to improve safety. I know they were introducing, was it rumble strips at a few corners as well? Just trying to read my notes on this one. They had beveled curbs in place of the steel ones at turns 4, 8, 10, 11, 17 and 23, which again, I think most of those are going to be designed to slow the cars down a little bit. They're not really necessarily like sausage curbs or anything crazy like that. I mean, that would be terrible if they introduced those in there as well. But I think when it comes to safety measures, as important as they are, I do think there is a balancing act with this. Like, as I said, I subscribe to the idea that, you know, you've got to try and make F1 as safe as it possibly can be, but there is an element where you can sometimes make things a little too safe and it takes away what makes F1 exciting. I get that. And I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, how often have you guys seen that video of Max Verstappen, the lap that very nearly was but wasn't, in, 2021? You know, he was absolutely flying. Everyone was glued to the screen. We saw Fernando Alonso halfway through an interview, just couldn't take his eyes off, and it was phenomenal. The cameras were positioned so well to make the car look as fast as it was. But then, of course, he had that crash. And, you know, we saw that. We saw Mick Schumacher's crash and stuff like that. Those sorts of elements that make F1 so exciting. Like, if you get to a point where you try and make it too safe, there is a risk perhaps you might take away something special, what makes F1 exciting. I'm probably wording this wrong, but I think some people that make this argument, I think they can kind of relate to what I'm saying.
Well, I would have said
yeah.
on too safe an example for you, Adam, is red flagging a wet race until it stopped raining and the circuit's completely dry. That is too safe, which we've seen occasionally in the last few years.
I mean, don't tempt them. Don't tempt them. They might. I mean, I don't think we're going to see rain in Jeddah, but
I mean, that would be different, wouldn't it? But that was just an example for you being too safe, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it might be an automatic red flag in Jeddah if they if it started raining over there, amongst other things. But as I said, what I'm trying to say is, things that we love and things that we enjoyed about F1. As I said, that lap from Verstappen that never was finished. If it was, it would have been incredible. But I think so many elements about that, why we see it over and over and over again, is what really excites people about the sport. And I think it really gives us a sense of appreciation as to how talented and amazing these drivers are. I mean, they're the best drivers in the world for a reason. And as I said, some people will make the argument that whilst I advocate for safety in F1, all the time, I do agree that there has to be a balancing act made to make sure that you don't take away from what makes F1 special.
Oh yeah, completely agree. It's the risk reward element that is to be obviously judged accordingly. And it's not just on the circuit designers, but also on the FIA and what they do and actually following their own rules, which we have seen last season where they don't even follow their own rules.
Oh God, yeah.
So, but it always starts at home, so to speak.
Yeah, that is true. They've also moved.
I was referring to Japan as a.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
I'm not referring to any other.
No, I'm moving that along really, but I get what you mean. I mean, less said the better on that one, I suppose. Moving on to some of the other changes they're making for this weekend's race in Jeddah, turn 27, DRS zones, they've been moved now. Yeah. So they've been, I believe I got this right, so they were moved from before the corner, the final corner, to just immediately after it, and the zone down the straight, the final straight, that's been shortened by 75 meters. Now, I think a lot of people were complaining two things. One, about the constant DRS chicken that we saw last season and the season before. Both involved Max Verstappen, so make of that what you will. And the second the DRS straight going down at the start-finish, I always felt that was a little bit of a slam dunk. So I feel in terms of an overtake. So I think the FIA have looked at this, F1 have looked at this and thought, right, we've got to change this because one, it's too easy to overtake into turn one as a result of that. Although this year with the cars the way they are, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. And it's prevented drivers from, playing DRS chicken in the future. I mean, I can just imagine a scenario now, and I'm not picking these two out just for the sake of it, but because they're on the same piece of track at the moment fighting, thank goodness, Alonso Hamilton, I could very easily see them two having a good old game of DRS chicken, as they did at Montreal many years ago. Was it 2013? Alonso Hamilton, Ferrari, Mercedes. I had a little bit of a go like that. I'd love to see it because it's hilarious and it's entertaining, but the FIA have obviously made sure to try and eradicate that. I mean, what did you guys make of that? Did you do you think they should have just left it alone, or do you think they're right to change the DRS zones for this weekend's race?
It definitely needed to be refined. I think you put it perfectly there, Adam. It was a little bit too much of a slam dunk. It was almost like, well, look, if you start off behind, you're likely to lead into turn one. So, and that's why we saw the chicken. But I'm hoping that we still see it. Like I still want to be seen. So I still want there to be that element of doubt that if you lead into that corner, into that final corner, you could end up getting overtaken. So I'm just hoping that the changing of the DRS zone or the length of them sort of opens up that ambiguity, or probably in the word. But yeah, if they could have sort of, doubts whether they're going to be caught out along that long straight, that will create that, oh, should I, shouldn't I kind of thing. And they're the kind of scenarios that we want to see. So I don't want to be seeing the gamesmanship disappear altogether, but you also don't want it to be predictable at the same time. So hopefully these changes will sort of finesse what we already like about that section of the circuit.
Yeah, no, I agree. To be honest, I kind of liked it. I'm almost a little bit disappointed that they've gone the route that they have done. I mean, bear in mind, in both cases when we had the Leclerc-Verstappen game of chicken last season, which was brilliantly done by the pair of them, and obviously that's how you should do it if you're going to do it. and the Hamilton-Verstappen mess that we saw in 2021, which, of course, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole as to what caused all of that. But basically the same kind of theme going on there, and them two collided with each other. Again, not laying blame one way or the other. Let you guys do that in the comments if you want. But I can see the logic behind it, although I'm not a fan of what the FIA or F1 want to do on this one. I want to see more of it. I can trust the drivers. I suppose their logic behind it is, it's kind of like why they've made the changes to improve safety around the circuit, because I can't help but feel it in qualifying. You're going to get drivers that are going to go really slow on out laps. You've got someone gunning it round on a fast lap, and it only takes for one driver to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when everyone else is going around. It just causes a massive collision. It's like, do you remember a couple of years ago, Hamilton and, was it Mazepin? Nearly had a bit of an incident a couple of years ago for that kind of reason. So they have thought about it, and they have obviously asked the drivers for their feedback on this. And I think a lot of people saying, why didn't they do this last year? I think it was because Saudi, the race there was the second to last race in 2021, whereas in 2022 it was the second race. So there weren't much time to make those changes. But this time round, they've had a full year to make those changes. So as I said, I think the changes are a good idea. I just wish they left the DRS stuff alone, quite frankly. That was quite fun.
Yeah, well, actually, I would say I think it's, from a safety perspective, I think it's actually a good decision personally. I actually disagree with both of you on the DRS chicken aspect.
Boo.
Sorry to be a bore. But you can just imagine, especially how tight this midfield is this season. You just need to have too many cars doing DRS chicken in the midfield, and that's a recipe for disaster. So I think it's actually a good decision. Although I do have the concern of Courtney said that it makes it too boring. But it's a very much a wait and see. I wouldn't be surprised that they adjust it in the future, because they've maybe overdone it and then they refine it in the coming years to get the perfect balance. But it's obviously a wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, you end up with a Monza 2019 situation, didn't you?
Oh, don't.
That was, oh my God, that was
I forgot about that one. That was
so funny.
My evening.
Oh, that was so funny. It was annoying in a way as a spectacle, but when you look back on it, I just thought it was absolutely hilarious how that all went down. But you could see stuff like that happening, and it's another one where the FIA should really police this a little bit more. Drivers going excessively slow on out laps. I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but they often say every week, yeah, we're going to police this. We're going to make sure drivers stick to a certain delta. I've seen some drivers go around ridiculously slow, slower than they should be, and I never see them enforce it. So
the delta's like 10 minutes. So it's like...
Well, it shouldn't be though. It shouldn't. It's like, I swear it's like 2.5 minutes or something like that, but it's not, is it? They're like, literally, I've seen marshals running past some of these cars as they go through. So I don't know. You know, maybe I'm just having a bit of an old man rant here. I don't know, but yeah, we'll see. But you know, changes made overall seem to be going in the right direction in terms of improving safety. Let's just hope it doesn't take anything away from the spectacle of the race, because of course it's one of the most exciting races of the year. And I think after what we saw in Bahrain, where a lot of people felt a little bit disappointed of how the racing was, you know, no fault of those that benefited from it, I think this is kind of what we want to see happen this weekend. Not so much chaos, but a little bit of excitement and maybe the touch of controversy. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of success, I thought I was going to say controversy there. Let's talk about Red Bull. Now, Red Bull go into this race, the heavy favourites. As we expected, they started the season off incredibly strong in Bahrain with pace to burn by the looks of it. I think it's probably safe to say that even though Red Bull might be the favourites, I don't think any of us are expecting their advantage to be as huge as it was in Bahrain last time around. What are your thoughts on Red Bull? Should they be concerned about the pack behind them?
Again, I think the only thing that gives me some hope that we'll have some sort of competitive action at the very front is that this circuit has very different characteristics compared to Bahrain. But it would surprise me in the slightest if Red Bull are very much the team to beat. Maybe we'll see a bit more of a mix-up on the grid with the qualifying, because I think something that a lot of us forget, and I did on a couple of occasions, is actually how close the pecking order was in qualifying. It was only like a tenth or so separating a lot of these drivers. So, and we all know that Verstappen, of all people, knows how unforgiving this circuit can be. So My main hope for the weekend is that we get a mixed up grid in qualifying, because what really didn't help, well, the only thing that offered a little bit of entertainment at the very front is the fact that Sergio Perez got overtaken at the start. If he only got overtaken at the start, they would just both have been going off in the distance, the way that we saw with Mercedes from 2014 to 2016. That's my concern for this season. But the qualifying is a lot closer compared to Mercedes were like qualifying on pole by like 7/10 of a second. After one race, I know it's only one race, the qualifying did seem a lot closer. So if we see a special lap from, I don't know, maybe a Fernando Alonso, for example, if he starts that race on pole, that offers us a good talking point. And we all know how good a defensive driver Fernando Alonso is. I think for me, I think that's his biggest attribute. So if he starts on pole, we could be seeing some supreme defending defensive skills from Fernando.
Oh, Fernando train. Oh, what a train that would be.
Except the annoying thing is this train's going to pull away from you rather than keep you back. It's like it will start off that way. I can imagine the scene now. You've got Sir Lewis Hamilton sitting there, Fernando Alonso ahead of him in P2 or something, and Lewis has put it on P3, and then he's going along and he's thinking, oh, here we go, another Alonso train, but this one is pulling away from him and it's getting frustrating. It's like, that's a whole nother level of frustration, really, than what we're used to. So, as much as I'm sure Sir Lewis would want to be ahead of Fernando, I don't think it's going to be the worst thing in the world if he sees that green Aston Martin in front of him on the grid, providing, of course, he's actually quite high up himself. I don't think he'd want to be battling for P6 or P7 or anything stupid like that. But, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Interesting on Perez, though, he put it on pole last season, and he was a bit unlucky with how the race sort of panned out on strategy. It didn't really go in his favour when the safety car came out after he'd made his first stop. So, you know, this time around, king of the street circuits from 2022, Sergio Perez. I think he did better than anybody else there. He, was brilliant in Baku, won in Monaco, won in Singapore. He put it on pole in Jeddah. This could be a race, if Sergio Perez wants to state his intention at Red Bull of all teams to try and win this championship. And as I said, big if, this is the perfect place to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, the second race of the season is also the perfect timing to one apiece. I mean, that'd be a great start for Sergio if he does it, and obviously, as you said, the king of the street circuits. One way or another, that was his title he earned last year. But it'd be very interesting to see if he can repeat a pole position this year. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Red Bull as a whole here. Max Verstappen looked incredibly dominant. There were some issues that they were having or managing throughout the race, but then I'm sure everybody was having their own issues. And hopefully we'll see a bit more of them this weekend rather than just to check in if they're still in the race and when they finish, etc. But I'll put a poll out for the 2023 season on Red Bull. And thank you again to you guys who took the time to answer these questions. Really appreciate that. As I said, get your questions in to us at DNF1 and we'll read and answer some of those in future episodes as we go along. I asked the first one, and that was, can Red Bull win every race in 2023? Now, interestingly, only 53% of you said no. 47% of you said yes. Now, I'm going to ask you guys the same question, but instead of can, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, will Red Bull win every race in 2023? Based on what we saw in Bahrain, you certainly can't rule it out, but what do you guys think?
So they can based on pure pace, but I think particularly in this day and age, we've obviously got new aspects of a race that makes races in general a lot harder to win. I think one of the most dominant cars I remember off the top of my head is the MP44 in 1988 that won all but one race, and that was only because both the drivers DNF'd in Monza. Is that right, Adam? Looking at you, the historian here.
Yeah, and Senna was taken out by a back marker, he was going to win that race anyway, so they would have cleaned up.
But I think the difference then, and again, I'm saying this like 90% sure, back then they didn't have safety cars. Safety cars throw a lot more chaos when it comes to tyre strategy, pit stops, and the rest of it. So I feel it's a lot more difficult for a team to win every single race compared to how it was in the 80s, for example.
Yeah, and I think your history's right, Courtney, because I believe the safety car was introduced in 1993, and the reason I remember that is because it was research that we was doing for that beginner's guide video we first made a couple of years ago. So definitely on the channel, if you haven't seen it, guys. Probably a little bit out of date because the rules have changed on a few things, but safety cars, they weren't around in 1988, so no, well done on that. I agree. I think it's absolutely conceivable that Red Bull could win every race this season. They have the pace to do it from what we saw in Bahrain. Of course, we're going to need a bit more evidence. If they win this weekend and perhaps win in Melbourne as well, there's a bit of variety of circuits there. We've had an unnormal street circuit or abnormal street circuit in Melbourne. Still has those characteristics. You have the fast street circuit in Jeddah, and you have a regular race circuit in Bahrain, which of course is quite unique and tests the cars in plenty of different ways. That's why it's a great venue for testing. You get a nice variety of different circuit types, which kind of ticks almost all of the boxes before eventually we go to Baku and do it all again there. If Red Bull win those first 3 races, I think there's a very good argument to be made that if there aren't any reliability issues or any crazy safety car affected strategies which hinder them for whatever reason, there's absolutely no reason why they can't go on to win every race this season. That doesn't mean I think they will. I think it's incredibly difficult, almost impossible to manage that for a plethora of reasons. But right now, given the advantage they have, and we're talking almost W11 2020 advantage here, you know, if you want to compare so far, maybe more than that, we'll have to wait and see. There's absolutely no reason why they can't do that.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you there. Both of you, I do think they could, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit it at the end of the season, depending on how far they got. How many races will they win this season? Who knows? You know, it could easily be up there with what they did last season, maybe even more than that. But certainly looking good for Red Bull right now. Lee, I remember we were talking about this before we went on, but Christian Horner had a few interesting words to say about past regrets for, was it Alex Albon and Gasly compared to Perez? Because, I mean, Perez, as a teammate for Verstappen, probably fits the perfect dynamic, really. He's experienced to not be fazed by Max. He's fast, but probably not too fast to cause problems in the team in that regard. And, you know, he's proven to be a loyal teammate so far.
Yeah, so I'm only paraphrasing because I don't remember where it's off the head and I don't have what Christian said to hand. But what he was obviously stating was Sergio's been a brilliant asset to the team and what he's brought to the team, obviously helping them secure the Constructors' Championship last year. Obviously missing out on P2 was unfortunate in the drivers. But just being an excellent teammate and being close enough that he's been there to pick up the pieces when Max unfortunately wasn't. And they was just basically, as you said, the past regret. They wish they had an experienced driver to replace Daniel when Daniel left instead of promoting from within, which obviously was Pierre and Alex. And they just a what if and what could have been situation. Then obviously Pierre's moved on, and obviously Alex still has his ties to the Red Bull family overall. But I would say it was just a very interesting thought that there was some potential regrets or thoughts that they made the wrong choice promoting from within at the time. And you look back on it, the time where they were promoted, they did feel a bit rushed because they didn't have the time to settle in and learn the craft, and especially being at the front. So I can understand that viewpoint. It's obviously it's taken them a few years to realise it.
Yeah, very, very true. Let's move on. And of course, guys, let us know in the comments below what you think if you're watching this on YouTube. Can Red Bull win every race in 2023? Will they win every race in 2023? Let me know your thoughts. Get involved in the discussion. Let's move on to Ferrari now. And licking the wounds after a difficult weekend in Bahrain, which saw them once again throw away a huge chunk of points. We thought Ferrari were going to establish themselves as clearly the second best team on the grid. Didn't go to plan, and the reliability issues that hindered them in 2022 don't seem to have gone away. Or if anything, perhaps they're worse. We'll have to wait and see. Charles Leclerc losing a podium, Carlos Sainz struggling on tyre performance, and over the course of the race falling back towards Aston Martin and even Mercedes. Almost quite worrying signs there. However, at this circuit in Jeddah, a different circuit, different characteristics, plenty of optimism for Ferrari to try and right some wrongs and showcase what their performance really is, as some people suspect. However, it's not exactly gone to the best of starts this weekend. More pain for Charles Leclerc with a 10-place grid penalty because he's had to already take his third control electronics unit of the season in the second race, mind you. You're only allowed 2 over the course of the season. He's already taken his third one, and based on what Ferrari has said, this was the part that also failed during the race, which ruined his race for him, on top of the part that failed before he'd even started the race. So, I mean, I put a poll out, guys, to say, can Ferrari take the title fight to Red Bull? 23% of you said yes, they could. 77% said no. So to the 23% of you, myself not included, I must say, and I'm the biggest Ferrari fan going, but even I am not that confident. You guys are amazing. Hope you have all the happiness in the world and that all your dreams come true and etc. because you deserve it for the level of optimism you have with Ferrari. Guys, it's just when it rains, it pours at Maranello, pardon the pun, and for Charles Leclerc especially. I mean, it's an absolute mess at Ferrari right now, isn't it?
Do you know what? A lot of these issues that we're seeing, we've already seen two of the biggest teams in Formula One in crisis after one race. Now, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, Adam. Don't worry, I won't be on it for too long. This is where my bugbear lies with the lack of testing. I understand the whole thing with cutting costs, but there's a reason why these teams were testing as much as they were. On the flip side of that, I'm hoping because of the lack of testing, we're yet to see the true pace of some of these teams, and it might give us something a little bit more to hope for in the coming races. But I just have an issue with the lack of testing and also the amount of rules coming in with parts. I feel, look, I know they're trying to make F1 more affordable for particularly new teams coming in, trying to make it more competitive. But it just feels almost gimmicky. Like, there's going to be a point during the season that pretty much every single driver on the grid is going to have to take 2, maybe 3 penalties. And I don't know. I find it a little bit over the top. And it always seems that with the rules and regulations that are made higher up, they very rarely find the sweet spot. It's always too much or not enough, but to an extreme level. And I just feel that yet again, this is just another aspect of the sport that I feel needs refining, because the lack of testing, I don't know. I just feel that we're seeing a lot of teams not on it at all. And I know that makes it, fun for some people. But in terms of making good competitive racing, we're more likely to see it if the teams have time to, obviously test what they have available, refine it, and make it the best version of what it can be.
I mean, it's an interesting point. I remember watching testing. I remember they actually talked about this as well. And I think Anthony Davidson for Sky F1 was saying that, these teams could have 364 days of the year to test, and they'll turn up on the 365th one to race, and they'll say, oh, we still need more time to test. That's just F1 for you. And I get that. I think with the engine issue and the power unit issue, if you like, I do think F1 teams have kind of realised that there is a bit of a balancing act here, that they are prepared financially to not spend too much time on reliability and also for performance as well. They obviously realised that over the course of the season that the wear of these parts happens so much that they're more likely to get better results over the course of the season if they are prepared to take a penalty at a certain venue where they can get free engine parts, take that pain, and it pays them back in much higher dividends than it would do to just stick to the required limit. Now, of course, ideally you'd want to avoid those engine penalties, but we see last year at certain races, teams thought, well, we might as well just take the free engine parts. We might as well, because it's not going to punish us anymore. Some of the bigger teams do it when they have, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Ferrari did that with Charles Leclerc and made him start at the very back of the grid. Just say, well, look, it makes it easier for us. I think it gets to a point as a result of that where the FIA or F1 need to step in and say, okay, either change the rules on the kind of penalties that you're going to get for these things, or up the limit to say to these teams, okay, you can have an extra one of these components or an extra one of these ones, just to avoid them doing that or taking a cheap penalty. I don't think you're going to solve that issue altogether, but I think teams have kind of cottoned onto this idea that they already know that the limited number of power unit components that they're required for each area is already not enough for them to achieve their targets over the course of the season. So rather than spend ridiculous amounts of money trying to sort that so that they are reliable enough, or trying to, manage it so that it affects them performance-wise over the course of the season, but at least they don't get a penalty in one race. They just take the pain at one specific venue, wherever that will be. We'll have to wait and see over the season. If it's Ferrari, it happens in Jeddah. If it's Mercedes, they may do it at Monaco or something silly like that. If they're not good in the slow corners, they might just do it there and write the race off. So I think there is something to be done there. What, I don't know, but we'll have to, wait and see. On the subject of Ferrari, before we go too far off tangent, as I said, more misery for them, more pain and reliability. I don't want to write them off and say that they haven't got a good car underneath them, but it just feels that a lot of the issues that they tried to address over the winter, they've either not been able to, so far from what we've seen, they've not been able to address all of them, or some of the things they've had to do to this car to compromise have caused other issues with this car. I mean, it's not strong at the front end, it's not managing the tyres properly. I don't know what Ferrari do at this point, and all of these things are now coming on Fred Vasseur straight away, and this is not something he would have wanted to get involved with straight away, and it's going to take some time before they figure out what to do, quite frankly.
On top of all the rumours about staff potentially leaving and onto other teams, Ferrari are off to a bad start, and unfortunately, I personally don't think it's going to be a very good season for them for multiple different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, David Sanchez, head of Aero, he's apparently going to McLaren once his gardening leave ends. Lauren Miquez, he's meant to be leaving the team. This whole shift from Benedetto Vigna, the CEO at Ferrari, and does he want to try and change things? Is the blame culture coming back to Ferrari already? It's an environment that right now Ferrari aren't overly happy with, and they've tried to get away from it. I personally don't think it works at all. I think you need to be a little bit more methodical and trusting and patient with that, but this is Ferrari. They're very different to every organisation for a reason, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful under this current regime. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, Charles Leclerc is already apparently rumoured to have sought out John Elkann, the chairman at Ferrari, because he wants to talk with him about his future with the team and what's going on, what their strategy is right now. Not a very good sign for Ferrari fans, hoping that their marquee star driver right now, a driver that is critically important to their future, may be at a point where he's at a crossroads over his future and wants assurances from those higher up that it's going to be sorted out sooner rather than later.
Do you feel a part of the problem at Ferrari? And look, I love Charles Leclerc as a driver. I really do. Like I've been like you, I've been fanboying over this guy for years. But do you feel that he lacks that winning cutting edge that the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen have? Like I just get a feeling that if Max Verstappen, for example, was to join Ferrari, he would bring that winning mentality around him, that experience, and it creates that hunger. And we saw it during Lewis's dominance as well. And we saw it with Schumacher as well at Ferrari. These exceptional drivers don't only have the raw pace, they have the ability to almost inspire those around them to, be the best version of themselves and give the best version of the car that they can. And I don't think we're seeing that yet from Charles. And maybe that's what Ferrari are as a team lacking right now.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the car's not fast. It can't even finish at the moment without potentially blowing up. So I don't even think it really matters what Charles Leclerc does behind the wheel right now. I mean, we saw in Bahrain that he was doing a very, very good job. I mean, Fred Vasseur claimed that he was matching Perez. I mean, he wasn't matching Perez, he was containing Perez. Let's get that right. And, as far as qualifying is concerned, they were not on terms with Red Bull. In Leclerc's hand, there would have been at least a tenth or two off the pace anyway. Even though he didn't do his second run, I don't think he had the pace to put it on pole position. So I think there's only so much that Charles Leclerc can do right now in terms of where to direct these cars, in terms of their development of what's needed. I'm pretty sure that him and Sainz are giving the feedback that they need to give to the team. But for whatever reason, whatever Ferrari are trying, it's not working. Even then, you can have drivers of that caliber. It doesn't necessarily always mean you're going to follow the feedback that they give. I mean, look what Sir Lewis Hamilton has been saying about Mercedes, for example. They've not been listening to him on certain elements. And I'm not saying that's because they think they know better than him and they're going to direct the car differently. But when you hear stuff like that, that suggests that there isn't cohesion there in one way or another, or something needs to be done. So I honestly don't know. What I do know right now is Charles Leclerc, week by week, is growing increasingly frustrated with what's going on at Ferrari. So much is changing very, very quickly. Matteo Binotto's not there anymore. As I said, David Sanchez is gone. Lauren Meeks might be going. There's Enrico Cardile, head of chassis, might be under threat there as well. There's so much changes going on right now that I feel like Ferrari, they need to do something, and something good in the short term, to convince Charles Leclerc to want to stay at the team. I'm pretty certain there are other teams around there that might feel they could try and entice him to go there. So, as I said, we'll have to wait and see, but it's not looking good for them at the moment.
Adam, I really hope you clip that and make a short video out of
that. Well, there's always something good to come from a mini rant every now and then, but I think we should focus on some positives as well. I mean, Lee, go into this Jeddah circuit. This Ferrari does seem to be pretty rapid in the speed traps. It was something that it wasn't last season compared to Red Bull. They have taken a bit of downforce off that car to accommodate that, if you like, in terms of balance. They're bringing a new front wing, apparently, that's going to give them better setup options and a bit more front end support, which is obviously important for them. And it's a circuit that, you know, does encourage the higher speeds and a little bit less downforce than what we're used to in Bahrain. So, you know, with all those ingredients, minus Charles Leclerc's penalty, we should expect a faster, more competitive Ferrari this weekend.
Yeah, I also don't believe the circuit is as rear tyre limited, which should obviously hopefully help with any tyre wear issues that the Ferrari has. And I also say Carlos doesn't have any engine penalties, so that's just on a positive note as well.
So far.
So far, true. I was trying to give you a positive spin. You might take it negative. But yeah, I think this circuit should suit the Ferrari better than Bahrain. So there is hope that they can obviously be in the fight, at least with Carlos. I mean, Charles could be in it too. He could be in a speeding bullet and just overtake the field like Max did in Spa last year. So it's not over yet. Yeah, I think the main thing that Charles will have to obviously think about is keeping his nose tidy. All right, he's going to be starting in the midfield, and this, as we already said, this circuit is a bit accident prone. So he just has to keep his nose out of the way. I say nose, it's more likely the nose or front wings is going to get clipped, but keep it clean and tidy, stay out of accidents, and you can find that he's gained a few places because some cars have crashed out ahead of him. So it's not over for Charles by any means. Just the main thing is bring the car home. What he can do is bring the car home. The car, that's a different discussion. I'm keeping it positive.
Yeah, I mean, will it come home under his power or on a crane? We'll have to wait and see because it's breaking down. But I'm usually more optimistic as a Ferrari fan than this, but I keep it real because, you know, I've seen it many, many times before, and this is just the latest chapter of endless suffering for Tifosi, and I'm right there with you guys, honestly. Heart goes out to all of you. Let's move on to Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso, nice cushy podium on his first race for Aston Martin, claims this car is a bit basic, claiming that there's going to be more to come from Aston Martin this season. And it got the attention of Red Bull, amongst other people that were making slight jibes at them and jokes about the fact that they were up to their old tricks again and copying them. Now, we should mention that whilst Red Bull are making those jokes, to compare them to the Racing Point days, which Aston Martin formerly were in, what was it, 2020? When they came up with the Mercedes copy, the Tracing Point, that's right. And it was a very good car. You know, that they almost got away with it, other than, you know, one minor issue with the, what was it, the brake ducts or something like that at the rear of the car. And obviously they got penalised for it, which ultimately cost them P3 in the Constructors' Championship, and rightly so under the circumstances. Aston Martin this year, they haven't copied the Red Bull, so to speak. They are allowed to look at pictures and do certain things, reverse engineer that, and make their own designs based off of that information. You know, they're only limited on certain parts that they can buy. If anything, it's probably more Mercedes than Red Bull, or at least the rear of the car as far as Lewis Hamilton is concerned. So, you know, Christian Horner was sort of making a little bit of a joke about them, you know, calling them the green Red Bull. Sergio Perez in the after-race interview was saying it's nice to have a podium full of Red Bulls in there, referring to Fernando Alonso. I'm sure Fernando Alonso wouldn't mind so much. He'd probably love to be driving a Red Bull right now. But Aston Martin look the real deal. And I think we're going to have to judge them, how good they really are over the next few races. So with that in mind, guys, even though in Bahrain they look the second fastest car, they proved to be the second fastest car overall, can they repeat their heroics in Jeddah compared to Bahrain? Or is it just a flash in the pan and we'll see them fall behind the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes coming into this weekend's Grand Prix?
Yeah, there's no reason why they can't. I'm fully expecting Aston Martin to be in the mix again. I'm more interested to see how Lance Stroll gets on, because obviously the last race was a struggle for him. Still managed to put in a decent performance, but it'd be interesting to see how Aston Martin get on with both drivers close to, the level they usually drive at. So you should expect Lance Stroll to be more in the mix as well, and that obviously makes life harder for the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes. But at the end of the day, this is all the politics of Formula One. They're all watching each other. They're all waiting for the slightest opportunity to have a go at each other. But let's be honest, if it wasn't for Aston Martin this year, it'd be an awfully dull season. So this is probably like one of the feel-good stories coming out of Formula One at the moment. And I feel that Fernando Alonso will be, motivating the team. We know that sometimes when things aren't going his way, he can have the opposite effect and completely lose the respect of the people within his team. So let's hope he's learned from his previous experiences and just channels positive energy rather than the negative energy that we saw in the past, particularly during his time at McLaren.
Yeah, I mean, we should pay tribute and praise to Lance Stroll because, finishing in P6 in that race, he was a thorn in the side of Mercedes, got the move done on George Russell, and this all came 12 days after having surgery and recovery from quite some bad injuries with his wrist and also with his toe as well. It was really, really bad. And for him to pick himself up, I didn't think he was going to be able to make it. I didn't think Aston Martin should have put him in that car at all after testing. I was absolutely convinced it was going to be Felipe Drugovich that was driving. That said, he drove a phenomenal race, and it makes me wonder if Lance can put in a performance like that. How can he do once he gets fully up to speed and he's feeling 100% fit? It's really exciting for Aston Martin. And, I think it does allow us to sort of emphasise how good Lance Stroll is at just getting in a car and finding the performance straight away. We often talk about drivers that take a while to warm up over the course of the weekend and they find their performance when they need to. Stroll doesn't have that issue. He may not have a higher ceiling as some of the best drivers on the grid, but he has no trouble finding his limit straight away, and he did a phenomenal job under the circumstances.
I was very impressed with his drive last time out. I know he's had a pole position, but last time out was the first time that I've been impressed by Stroll and what he delivered. And I'm like, wow, this is if this is Lance, which obviously some people in the paddock have raved about what Lance can do, but we haven't seen it. And if he can deliver this, or last time he delivered that performance, like, okay, this guy does deserve to be on the grid. If he's not obviously a paid driver, he's not a paid driver. His father owns the team, but he's not just a paid driver, so to speak. And there because his father owns the team, and he's actually can deliver on merit. And I really hope he can keep this performance up and prove to the doubters, which I was one of them, that he deserves to be there. And I'm very happy to see him pick up that gauntlet and keep going, and obviously take the fight to Fernando.
Yeah, we need a new name for that. What it's called when your dad owns the team, because there's paid driver, and then that's just something else altogether.
Yeah, got a thing when you're acronym.
Can I just say one last thing with Lance? If he does, shall we say, too well, it will kick off massively between him and Fernando, because if he starts, shall we say, start beating Fernando, naturally there's going to be suspicions that he's getting preferential treatment because his dad owns the team. So if, hypothetically speaking, Lance Stroll does start getting the better of Fernando, it will kick off 100%. I have no doubt about that whatsoever.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Quick question I put to the followers of the show. Will Fernando Alonso win a race with Aston Martin in 2023? 76% of you guys said yes. 24% said no. I feel like I should ask you guys, but if I remember back to the predictions, you both picked Fernando Alonso as your different or surprise winner for 2023. So I guess for the sake of the argument, what are you guys going for?
Yeah, if Red Bull have an off day, you'd put Fernando Alonso as a favourite, because even though Ferrari have the pace, still don't trust their reliability. So yeah, if Red Bull have a bad day, you feel it'd be Fernando be the first one to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, no, I agree. Lee?
Yeah, it's completely. If you give Fernando an opportunity of a race win, Fernando would take it with both hands and both feet, and he'll go and get that race win. As Courtney said, there's always needs Rebel off day or Aston to have a really good day and actually be hey, this circuit actually just suits our car a lot better than Red Bull, and bam, we're a lot closer to the Red Bull than we thought. That's it. Fernando's in, and he will go and take that. So I fully think he will get a race win this year.
Yeah, no, I absolutely see no reason why that won't be the case. I think the important point was what Courtney said earlier with Fernando Alonso. You know, if Red Bull have an off day, you would expect him to be there to pick up the pieces. It's something he's been very good at for his whole career, and it could happen. Aston Martin, it really, really could. They do look very fast, but of course, we will see over the next few races how good they really are. I think it's too early to judge based off one race. As excited as we all are, I think we need to sort of relax a little bit, see how they get on, and then I think we can judge them with a bit more information as this season presses on. Mercedes now, a team that could really do with a strong weekend to try and offset their woes. It wasn't, I mean, it was reliable, but that's probably about as far as we can go in terms of its strengths. It definitely doesn't look a match right now for Red Bull. It certainly looked like it was on the back foot against Ferrari and Mercedes, even at a point in the Bahrain race where we thought Hamilton was going to get signs as well, and then he just didn't have the pace. In Jeddah, not a circuit that Mercedes will be looking forward to going to. They had a tough time last season, except George Russell, who put in a great performance to finish in the top 5 there. Hamilton will know about the issues with this W14. It still has those drag issues. Won't have many slow corners except for the final one, so that will, pay off quite well for him. But it's a hard one for Mercedes. I want to say they could be in the fight with the Ferraris and the Aston Martins. They probably will be. But given how close this field is together and how draggy that car still seems to be, it could be one of those races where Mercedes are looking over their shoulder more than looking ahead of them. What do you guys reckon?
All I know is just that it sucks to be me right now because Mercedes are in the mud, West Ham are in the mud. I mean, you're lucky I'm on here, Adam. Jesus Christ. But yeah.
Should watch Rally, mate. Being in the mud isn't so bad by the sounds of it.
But you know what? I think for Mercedes, there's a lot of head scratching going on at the moment, and they will get it right one day. But I feel there are a lot of dark times to come before things start to get better. Adam, as a Ferrari fan, I know you've been saying that for the past 15 years. But
it's a coping mechanism, isn't it? You can only be in the mud for so long before you just either embrace it, hoping for better days, or you somehow just luck your way out of it. I thought last year was going to be like that, and then it just withered away.
But at least you're not alone now, Adam. You have company in me and Lee. Both of our teams, our favourite teams, are struggling right now. But yeah, I just think it's a case of taking the pain. I feel that it's going to do the same things they did last season, experiment a lot, just use this, because as I said about the whole testing thing, I do feel for some of these teams, actually all the teams, the first several races will be glorified testing sessions as well. And if your car's not doing well, you might as well do that. So unless something really dramatic happens, Mercedes will probably go in and say, look, this is just a data collecting mission. Get as many points as you can. We're not going to be in the mix for a win or a podium. Do the best as you can. Let's just get this data, take the pain over the coming races. There's talk of this big update coming in Baku. For the first time in like 9 years, I don't have the utmost faith in Mercedes development this year. I'm still getting over last year and obviously what's happening this season. But they just have to just collect that data, see what they can learn, and hopefully there'll be some green shoots of recovery from Baku onwards.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one. Lee, thoughts on Mercedes right now? As I said, like Ferrari, a team not necessarily in crisis, but almost at a crossroads right now of what they do going forward in 2023. Whilst Mercedes would have hoped to have been nearer to the front to kind of make this process a little bit easy for them, it feels, especially from the words of Sir Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, that, by writing off this season already, it almost feels like they're having to take 2 steps back to go 1 step forward. Looking at this race right now, they're looking at Ferrari, Aston Martin, Red Bull a little bit further away. As I said already, there might be a threat from behind them from the likes of Alpine and a few others maybe if they get their cards right. Where do you see Mercedes going in the short term? Because we already heard from Sir Lewis Hamilton in the past already that Mercedes hadn't been listening to him on certain bits of feedback or the direction of the car. He knows what a car needs, and what a car doesn't need. Mercedes, based on the inference of what he said, haven't really followed that. So the question, I suppose, that a lot of Mercedes fans and followers will be asking them is, what is the plan going forward? Do we, rip up everything that we know, go back to the drawing board, start again, learn a new concept and try and make that work? Or do they finesse what they already have and just hope that it, brings them forward to a point where they have a better platform to make that decision going forward?
Well, I think, as Courtney already alluded to, is this big update that they're planning on bringing in Baku. Obviously, there's some rumours that it's concept changing. There's some rumours that it's an improvement on their existing concepts, which they couldn't bring to the start of the season. So obviously, it's wait and see which rumour happens to be true. But I think that's really they're going to be the key defining moment of their season in the short term. Which obviously, I can't remember which race Baku is. No, I can't remember which race it is, but it's obviously a few races away. And that's really when they're going to have to decide on their concepts and the direction. But I also wouldn't be surprised, depending on Aston Martin's performance, if they already have started discussions internally within the Mercedes family, and especially the power unit side, of how they can support Aston Martin. Or obviously, if they admit defeat that Aston Martin is ahead of them, is a different thing. But giving them the latest engine updates as soon as the manufacturer team, obviously you want Aston Martin to be a pain in the side of the Red Bull. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes already start having those internal discussions about bringing everything they can to arm Aston Martin in maybe not in a title fight, but being a pain in Red Bull's proverbial behind. And I'm sure that's already been discussed.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic for Mercedes, one that they wouldn't have wanted to be in so early in the season. We asked you guys again, should Mercedes can they make this car concept work, or should they focus on 2024? 66% of you said they should focus on 2024, and I can kind of see the logic, really.
Yeah, I just want to make one last point with Mercedes. I'll be honest, I fell asleep on this matter a couple of years ago. I didn't realise that James Allison was going to take such a big step back with his role in the team, and the fact that there are rumours that he might come back and take a bigger role, that does give me some kind of encouragement, because we know that James Allison is one of the best designers in the game. So I just want to see him around as much as possible, because if anyone's going to help turn the team around, it would be James Allison.
Yeah, it's important sometimes to get some. I mean, Ferrari did this with Rory Byrne for a little while, and he played a part in the 2022 car, and et cetera, et cetera. Adrian Newey's still doing amazing things at Red Bull. So the old guard is still, I'm not sure if you can put James Allen in the old guard argument, but, he's still there and still needing a purpose. And obviously a team is having a hard time replacing some goated designers like those, quite frankly. And there we go. Let's move on let's talk about McLaren. I think we need to talk about them. And they had a dismal first race in Bahrain. Of course, they're obviously, they'll be looking for positives this weekend. The car needs to be reliable first and foremost, and it certainly wasn't there. It wasn't quick at all. Different characteristics on this circuit. What do you reckon, guys? Is this an opportunity for McLaren to make a step forward, or do you feel this is just going to be more pain until they get that huge update, which is basically going to be a brand new car, where, of course, they'll have to be on it?
Sorry, mate. I feel it's going to be very much like Mercedes. Going to be more of a data collecting opportunity for them, particularly for Oscar Piastri, because obviously it was his first F1 race that was cut short, so he'll be hoping to have a lot more laps underneath his belt. But the difference with McLaren compared to Mercedes is that they're a lot more further in their understanding of where they want to take the car. So I think they'll be more happy to take the pain in these coming races, knowing that there's a lot more optimism surrounding, from maybe Baku onwards, they're expecting a much bigger improvement. So there's probably more optimism surrounding McLaren than there is Mercedes right now, even though they're languishing towards the bottom of the grid.
Yeah, it does seem that way right now with McLaren. And I did want to talk about the situation they had with Lando Norris, but I do wonder with McLaren that for years now, since the decline, of course, since the Honda partnership, And of course, they had the Renault engines, as the issues with the Honda ones, of course. McLaren have always had something to point the finger at, say this is happening because of that, or this is happening because of that. It's out of our control. They were talking about last season with Daniel Ricciardo, how that didn't work. And, he was having a hard time with the car, and ultimately they replaced him with Oscar Piastri. Now, it's too early to pass judgment on whether Piastri is going to come to terms with a difficult car. We may really not need to worry about that if the car coming is going to be really, really good. But I almost feel sometimes that with Lando Norris behind the wheel, that he's able to drive so well despite the car's issues or work around it to the point where he's one of the best drivers on the grid and certainly one of the most sought after right now. If they have another driver like that in Piastri, it's almost like a bit of not a blessing in disguise, quite the opposite actually, because they can't deal with the car's issues if the drivers they have are so good at driving around these problems. What I'm trying to say is that Ricciardo, whilst I accept, other than Monza in 2021, his time at McLaren was abysmal. He wasn't at the standard required. He wasn't able to produce the performances they would have wanted him to. But I do feel like we have to cut in some slack and say that perhaps the car was also very, very difficult, and that having a driver as good as Norris almost kind of masked those issues. And perhaps that's what we're seeing here right now.
Well, I was going to say, in Daniel's defense, he knows what driving a good car feels like. And obviously, no offense meant to Lando, but he's only ever driven a McLaren. And Oscar, obviously, in a uncompetitive, and he's only going to driven a McLaren as well. So that, as you said, it may be Oscar maybe had to learn how to drive a McLaren because it's his only real car he's going to be doing long distances on. I'm not counting any testing he did in Alpine before. Obviously, all the mess that occurred last year. Lando's he's only driven the McLarens, but he has no reference point to other cars and how the car should feel, so to speak, from like Daniel's perspective. Which obviously hurts the development. If you go, oh, this isn't feeling great, but if you don't know what a perfect car feels like, which I'm sure Daniel, his time in Red Bull, they weren't obviously the title winners, but the Red Bull wasn't a bad car by any means. So it probably felt a lot better than McLaren felt for him. So I think it really hurts the development overall. Just not having that experience reference points to other cars.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Because, as I said, it depends on the feedback that they get given from Norris, and I'm sure it's very, very good. But it just makes me wonder that if McLarens are the architects of their own downfall, no pun intended, and it's almost worse for them that it's hard for them to spot those faults when they've got a driver that's so good at driving around these issues. And if they have another one in Oscar Piastri, I'm confident he probably will be like that in that regard, based on what we've seen of him in his junior career. It kind of is like a double-edged sword, almost, for McLaren, that in order for them to get better, they need to see where the car is bad, and based off the data that they have. I'm sure they're aware of it, but based on what we saw from the car so far, and obviously the plans that they decided to give up on 2023 and do a different version of that going forward, it's already put them on the back foot. So I worry for them, but I think we have to hold judgment. It's almost bought them a little bit of time, quite frankly. But then, of course, by the time this new car comes out, whether it's in Baku or after that, they've got to be on it straight away, because teams are going to be developing and ahead of them in that regard. That car has got to be very, very good. Otherwise, they're in a real tumultuous situation.
I would have said in the meantime, they need to focus on their reliability, because that was obviously pooling and borrowing. If they can get on top of their reliability before the new car comes along, that will really help them.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair point. Let's move on quickly to Alpine before we round up the other teams on the grid. Interesting race coming up for Gasly and Ocon. Ocon had a very strong qualifying. He was the fastest outside the top 4 teams, but he had a dismal race. I think he got, 3 penalties in the end? And I think the last time I saw that, wasn't it Maldonado? I can't remember what race it was that he did it, but it was tying a record for the most penalties awarded in a race. And then you had Pierre Gasly, terrible qualifying, almost a little bit overconfident, I feel, or a bit strange, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But he had a very, very good race. He managed to pull it out and put together one of those Gasly race performances where he just pulls something out of the bag and gets in the points. So I guess for Alpine this weekend, they're going to need both their drivers to be on it in both qualifying and in the race, so they don't lose any more ground in the midfield battle.
Yeah, I think particularly with Esteban Ocon, you saw the best and worst of him over one weekend. He does have a knack of getting himself into trouble. And I do feel that's hindered his career slightly because the pace is there with him. I have no doubt about that. But it's just that you can get a little bit hot underneath the collar. And I think that's why, there's a lot of talk and speculation. Obviously, there's a bit of a pass between the two drivers and why it could kick off. You just feel that if anyone was going to antagonise anyone, it'd be Ocon antagonising Gasly. And yeah, I do feel that the performance levels will level out and they'll actually be very, very close in terms of pure performance. So this might be a first example where we'll see them close together on track.
Yeah, that's a good point. And hopefully we see that between those two. It does feel right now that Alpine have not been able to make that step forward like Aston Martin have. I still think we've got more to come from Alpine, so I wouldn't write them off just yet. But right now it does feel that their biggest rivals could be McLaren, but we'll have to wait and see what McLaren do. Or they could end up in a lonely P5. We'll have to wait and see. One thing I did want to talk about, Pierre Gasly's made some interesting comments following the race. And this is, I'm going to paraphrase, but I want to get your thoughts on this. He was basically saying after the race that in testing, they weren't really able to run the car at its absolute maximum. And that for him, he found it quite hard to know where the limits were of the car or where to push or where not to push, etc., in the race. And I thought that was a bit strange because roughly speaking, isn't that his job? Isn't that what he's meant to do? Like when you're driving in those cars, you're one of the best drivers in the world. You're supposed to know where the limits are or where to push the car. Having the excuse and saying that because of testing you were running a strict program and you weren't able to do that. For me, I'm thinking, well, it's not really going to cut it though, is it? Quite frankly, because everyone else had their own programs of doing stuff, but they all seem to find the limits of their cars, or so to speak, a little bit more than what Gasly was admitting to. So I thought it was a little bit odd from Gasly. It was almost a little bit overconfident perhaps going into that first race, and I think he got a bit of a reality check on Saturday and then pulled it together on the Sunday.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of an odd statement. Maybe he's just not finding a comfortable place in that car, but I'm sure that will come. Yeah, but we all know how good Pierre can be. Obviously, he's a race winner. So it will come. My thoughts of Alpine is I wonder what Otmar is thinking that it's the first street circuit of the season. And as Courtney already said, with Ocon antagonising, if they're on the both same piece of track, on a street circuit, Otmar is going to be having flashes of, oh no, not contact, no.
Well, we saw this last year, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah.
That's I'm sure he's going to be having nightmares of that.
Well, we know that Netflix will be either that. Jesus Christ.
Oh, I would be very surprised if they're not in the Alpine garage this weekend, just following on. Just going to have to keep an eye on that one. Don't know what place it's going to be for, but I'd be surprised if Ocon and Gasly don't lock horns sooner rather than later. But then, of course, this is something we waited for, something we said was going to happen. And if it does, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, keep an eye on Alpine this weekend. I still think there's more to come from them. I'm just not convinced from what we've seen so far it's going to be enough to put them in a fight with Aston Martin. I think that one may have gone, and they may just have to focus on securing P5. But of course, they won't believe that. They obviously will want to join the fight as well, so we'll have to wait and see. Looking down the grid now, we've got Williams, Haas, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo. They seem to be the teams in the bottom end of the midfield battle, on the fringe of the points, and it's very, very tight between those teams right now. Who do we think are going to be the front runners in that one? Who do we think is going to stand out so far out of those four teams? Because, of course, Williams had a great weekend with Sargent and Albon. Unlucky not to get... Alex Albon, yeah, he did get a point. He got P10.
Yep.
Yeah,
so, of course, he did. Sargent had a great race. Haas, good qualifying, but the race didn't really work out for them. AlphaTauri, Tsunoda done well. De Vries done okay. Bottas was great, as always. Zhou, not so much, but, I'm sure there'll be more to come from him. But it's very tightly compact between those four teams. So who's going to shine in Jeddah this weekend out of those four? Can any of them get points?
Yeah, if it's anyone, I reckon, well, Albon will always be there or thereabouts, but Alfa Romeo in particular do tend to start the season strong. So I do expect Alfa Romeo to be in and around the point scorer positions as I love to raise. But yeah, earlier on in the season, there's hunger, particularly with Valtteri. We know that it's almost as if Valtteri and Alfa Romeo are the perfect combination because they both end up on the beach by the time you get to the end of the summer break. They just stay on the beach from August until the end of the season. But yeah, I'm expecting Alfa Romeo and Albon to be in the hunt for those final points.
Yeah, Bottas does seem to be the ace in the hole right now for Alfa Romeo, and he's very good at consolidating the advantage that they do seem to have at this point in time. Whether they'll be able to keep that remains to be seen. Lee, anyone else to watch out for in that battle? I mean, Williams looked quite handy at the moment, didn't they?
I mean, I actually agree with Courtney's selection there. Valtteri and Alex are going to be the ones to watch from those 4 teams.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You may be at a push throwing a Nico Hulkenberg because he performed well, but that's at a push. I think it's more the aforementioned 2.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, of course, Hulkenberg was racing last season for Aston Martin. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't mind being in an Aston Martin this weekend, but alas, the Haas will do for him. So, yeah, maybe the Hulk will have a better weekend. He didn't do bad in qualifying, so this might be a circuit where that will happen for him. We'll have to wait and see. Guys, let's do our bold predictions for this weekend's episode. So, we kind of had a bit of a rough one because Lee wasn't able to make it for that one. So, I think, in all interest and fairness, I think, Courtney, you and I, we might have just got the same level of points. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and check. They're starting a clean slate. Seeing as we're all here, first race, we're all here together. Let's do a clean slate on bold predictions. And I think if I remember rightly, the rules of it that we established in the last preview, Courtney, was we name our top 3, we name who's going to be on pole, and a bold prediction. And we get a point for every correct position in the top 3. The driver has to be in that position, not just the 3 in the top 3. Whoever's going to be on pole, we get a point for that. And what do you reckon? 2 points for a bold prediction, correct, or 3? What do you reckon?
2. Stick with 2. We'll play it safe.
Yeah, we'll tally these up over the course of the season, guys. Yeah. But we're going to start from this one race down in the interest of fairness. So Lee's not behind here. Play along at home if you want. Let us know in the comments for you. So Lee, I'm going to come to you first. Who's on pole? What's your top 3 look like? And can you give me a bold prediction as well? Or do you want to save that for the end, actually? Let's save that for the end. We'll do the bold ones at the end.
Okay. So my pole position is going to be Max.
Shock.
Yeah, I'm sorry to rock the boat on that one.
Are we all Max for pole?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's all do Max for pole. All right, so that's 1 point each for all of us so far. And top 3. You can tell I'm a confident Ferrari fan. Yeah. Top 3, guys.
So my top 3 would be Sergio, Max, and then Fernando.
Way to go, Lee. Going very... I mean, that might be a bold prediction, actually. Sergio wins the race. You can have that if you want. Courtney.
That was my bold prediction.
That's your bold prediction. All right, Sergio wins. That's Lee's. I'll let him have that, to be fair. I think that is bold, and no respect to Checo, but, Max looks so good right now. I'd be surprised if he doesn't win the race on merit. Courtney, what's your top 3 looking like?
Yeah, nothing quite as inspiring as yours, Lee. Max first, Checo second, and Alonso third.
Fair enough. And have you got a bold prediction?
With the bold predictions, I'm going to say, I don't know if it's bold given how things are going, and Alpine will finish ahead of a Mercedes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll accept that. I think that's probably fair. Top 3, Max, Checo, and I'm going to say Carlos Sainz, P3. And my bold prediction, I think... I'm going to go very bold. I'm going to say Logan Sargent gets points this weekend. I'm going to back Logan. He had a great weekend in Bahrain. Why not? Let's back Logan for this one. Logan to get points. That should be a pretty bold one. Guys, let us know your predictions. Let us know your top 3, pole position, or, write Max Verstappen if you want. Or if you're feeling daring to write anyone else, that can be your bold prediction if you like. And give us a bold prediction as well. But of course, if you have enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform if you think that we are worthy. But thank you so much for tuning in, guys. As always, really appreciate you joining us for a bit of F1 chat heading into the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix this weekend. But until next time, thanks for tuning in. Please stay safe, and we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
See you soon.
Goodbye.